Namaste. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Astrology World of Avinash Parva. In my first video, we have mentioned about the birth chart, about Lagna chart, and there we discussed few things about the 12 zodiac signs, 9 planets, and the birth charts showing the 12 houses. Now, in this video, we'll talk about the 12 different houses and their roles. What do we see in each of those 12 houses? Who do we see in every house? What are the things that we can see from each of those 12 houses? So we'll start from the first house. So first house in any birth chart, we are taking a North Indian style. So the first house always talks about the nature, about your nature, about your body, about your patience. Means yourself is indicated by the first house. Definitely first house matters the most. Next comes the second house. From second house we can see lots of things. We can see your relatives, your society, your words, your profit, your savings after all the expenses. Whatever money is saved with you, that is seen from second house. Then comes your taste. Also, it talks about your food habit. Then comes third house. So many people consider third house as one negative house. Why? Because third house indicates about your extra efforts, how brave you are. But because of the extra efforts that you need to put, some people consider it as negative house, although it is not completely negative. It does indicate about your extra effort, but there are many other things. For example, it shows your siblings as well. Then comes your fourth house, very important house of anyone's life. Fourth house indicates your mother, your mother's health, your relationship with your mother, your peace of mind. It shows about your properties like your house, your car, your own property, the property that you get from your parents. Everything is shown in fourth house. Then comes fifth house. Fifth house is also a very important house. It talks about your education, it talks about your child, it talks about your love affair, it talks about any lottery that you get, it talks about your memory power, it talks about your any uncertain gain, any uncertain loss. And fifth house, and you should not forget, fifth house talks about your wish fulfillment. In other words, in Hindi we call it as Panchames. We see the Panchames from fifth house. So Panchames, the fifth house, is a very, very important house. In our next videos, we'll be talking about fifth house and what are the impacts that we see in the birth chart of other planets on this particular house. We'll be talking more about fifth house. We'll be talking only about fifth house in a particular video. So after fifth house, we get sixth house. Sixth house is considered as a negative house. Sixth house, from the sixth house itself, we see the debt, the loan, illness, accident, etc. So we see many of the things that we don't want to see, unpleasing things. However, not a single house is always negative. Sixth house indicates about competition in the jobs. You get the job through competition. That competition is being shown in the sixth house. So again I am repeating, no house is completely negative. like normally 6th, 12th and 8th house, those houses are considered as negative houses, but yes, they have lots of positive aspects as well. We'll be talking about those positive aspects and malefic effects one by one. So after 6th house, there comes the 7th house. 7th house is diagonally opposite to the first house. 7th house is the house of your spouse. It talks about your spouse. Like for husband, it talks about wife. For a lady, it talks about uh, her husband. And also, not only husband and wife relationship, also the 7th house talks about business partners, about your relationship with your business partners. So, and it is one of those four center houses. First, fourth, seventh, and house, those are center houses. So, seventh house is one of them. Next comes eighth house. Eighth house, like sixth house, eighth house is also considered a negative house. It indicates obstructions. It indicates about death. However, again, like sixth house, the eighth house has also got some positive aspects, because the eighth house talks about deep study. It definitely takes a person to a very higher position. So we cannot call it completely negative. Whenever we were studying this astrology and we were getting the horoscopes of many world famous scientists, many knowledgeable people, we did see that they have got huge impact of that 8th house planet in their life. So in case of many people, it is the 8th house planet that took them to that top level. So we cannot call them a house completely negative. After 8th house, we go to 9th house. 9th house is a trikona house. First, 5th and 9th house, they form a triangle. So these three houses are called trikona house. They form the triangle. 9th house indicates your luck. It talks about your father. It also talks about your foreign tour. 9th house talks about your foreign tour. However, it does not talk about your foreign settlement. Foreign settlement is always seen from 12th house. And also from 9th house we can see your teacher. It indicates about your teachers. Next come 10th house. 10th house is mainly about profession, the profession type, achievement in profession. Sometimes, to some extent, it shows about your professional peers, your colleagues. However, your networking, your society in the professional domain, in the known circles of your profession, those are seen from 11th house. 11th house is mainly about income. 11th house also shows some minor diseases. Then comes the 12th house. 12th house shows expense, it shows loss, it shows medical expenses. However, it shows foreign settlement. And we must remember 12th house shows your spiritual self. That is why if we see now that 6th, 8th and 12th house show some of the things that nobody wants to have in his or her life. For example, 6th house shows disease, accidents, 8th house shows obstructions, death, and 12th house shows expenses. However, the same houses also show some very good quality that brings up the extra things from a person. As just now I mentioned about the 8th house. 8th house indicates the deep study. That is why we cannot ignore any of these houses. Whether be it first house, fourth house, 9th house, or 12th house or any house, you cannot neglect any of the houses. That's why in our next video I'll try to talk more about the houses, and now we'll be talking about the planets. And we see the numbers in the houses, then we see some planets. Say for example, here Jupiter may be written somewhere, it may be written as Rahu, somewhere it may be written, say for example, in one house you may be seeing 3 planets, and in another house you may be seeing that only the number is there, but you can't see the name of any planet. We'll talk about those numbers and planets in our next video. Namaste.